Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Bufnagle the podcast, where we explore entertaining and enlightening discussions of the adventure of life and all things good. From science and technology to history and philosophy to leadership and success. We hope to give you a better understanding of the world and skills for everyone to pursue their own adventure.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Bufnagle the podcast, where we talk about all things good in the pursuit of the adventure of life. I'm Rafe, and today's episode is the final, the final summary of the summer school sessions. I think is episode 5 of that. So I did 8 weeks of summer school and condensed it down here to 5 episodes, all for your listening pleasure and to save you time and effort, because we know how we like to save time and effort. So before we go any further, thank you very much for being the great listeners that you are. Because of you, we are a global top 10% podcast. You can reach us, as always, at bufnagle@bufnagle.com. Remember to share the love, share the buff, give us a 5-star review, subscribe, hit like, give a smiley star, tell your friends to listen, and you will get a free episode. And remember, you can always click the little link in the show notes there and buy me a coffee, which would be a nice thing on a cool autumn day like it is today. When we last left the summer school sessions, we were halfway through. We were halfway through the weeks in Bruges, in Belgium, and we had done a lot of drawing. This is what we tend to do at architecture camp. And the last half of Bruges, though, was a little bit more project focused. We were assigned projects in groups. So there was a group that I was put with. They tend to balance this out. They put really good people with people like me in the sense that hopefully we'll build a good team. You can't take the top 5 drawing people and put them all on the same team, because you'd be left with, at the bottom of the line, you'd be left with 5 guys like me, which would have been, you wouldn't have wanted to see what we would have produced. But as a group, we were able to produce some really good things. So my group had, like I said, it had 5. It had an urban planner lady from Turkey, a landscape architect from Mexico, an architecture student from Germany, actually from Buxtehude, which is it's a joke here in the U.S. that when you're going somewhere and you don't know where it is, you say we're going to Buxtehude, but it turns out Buxtehude is actually a place in Germany. And I found out that they do the same joke in Germany that we do here with you don't know where you're going, you go to Buxtehude. It's kind of like a Timbuktu place, but both of those places actually exist. So that was the 3 of them: urban planner lady, the architect, landscape architect from Mexico, the architecture student from Buxtehude, Germany, a high school student from Portugal, and then a lowly retired mathematician guy from Indiana. That would be me. And our project was a site plan for an area of Bruges that was undergoing some kind of urban renewal. We're adding some retail and housing, about 100 units of housing, and an open market for groceries and farm produce and those kinds of things. So you can shop local and get fresh produce and those sorts of things. So this was tucked on the north side of the city, up against the canal, and it was kind of an industrial area 100 years ago or so, and that has kind of fallen into disfavor. A lot of heavy industrial is no longer there in these cities. So they want to make it, they want to spruce it up, but have it be consistent with the feel, with the air that is in Bruges. We want it to be Brugesque, I guess. So much like we did in Bar, making things bar-like, we're trying to make them Bruges here. And my particular part ended up being a triangular housing block, basically retail stuff below and apartments up above, some classic Bruges stepped gable row houses, I guess you call them, but designed to be consistent with what the other blocks are doing. So there was a couple of people working on housing blocks. One guy was working on the market. Other people were trying to figure out where we're going to put all the cars, and maybe we need to reroute some streets and things like that. So that was kind of how it had been done. And so I did put some pretty classical buildings in the corners and the row homes in the middle, and put a garden in there and a little fountain. And it was great fun. It was a little bit frustrating because every time you make progress, you have to go back and erase. And but that's the nature of the beast. And I think that's probably part of the, I don't want to say the gauntlet that one must run, but it is you learn by doing that, and I think that's probably a good thing. So we worked on that over the last couple weeks, pretty much 2 of the last 3 weeks that we were there in Bruges, but there were other things going on in Bruges as well. So Bruges was it's a tourist town, so it has lots of parties on a regular basis because people don't want to go there and just look at the shops. They want to enjoy their time there in Bruges. So there were, like I said, there were lots of parties. One evening in early August, there was it was a Saturday. I think it was a Saturday night. They had music venues at every town square and every park of any size had a stage and video boards and bands cranking out classic rock and roll in a medieval setting. It was very loud. If you were a Brugian, a Brugette, whatever they are, it was loud until probably about 1 o'clock in the morning. It was very interesting to observe, but it was all. I didn't see any. People weren't. People were well behaved. They were singing along and they were enjoying themselves there in the summer. It was, mid-August, so the weather was perfect, and it was a very fun thing to see. The whole town was rocking until the wee hours. It was a great time. The Feast of the Assumption was another thing that happened there in Bruges in August. That's August 15th. And it is celebrated in a special way in Bruges. There's a parade called the Bruges Belofte, or sometimes called the Blindekens, something like that. I think these are Flemish words or French words or something. But anyway, there was this battle back in 1304. Okay, so that's like 700 years ago. 1304, there was this battle against the French. So the craftsmen in Bruges went to the defense of Bruges and the other towns around here because they were under attack by the French, and they had a battle at Mons de Pevele, something like that, one of these places, and in 1304. Now this battle was the French reaction to their defeat at the Battle of the Golden Spurs in 1302. So the Belgians had beaten the French in 1302, and then by 1304 the French had enough of getting their face rubbed in it, so they said, "We're coming back. We'll meet you at Mons de Pevele." And they, the Belgians, the craftsmen in town had to come to the defense of the towns, and the locals were very worried. So they prayed a lot, and they asked for the intercession of Our Lady, and she delivered the craftsmen back home safely. So that's the Belgians held off the French right there at the battle, but eventually the French, in a treaty signed the next summer, took the towns of Lille, Douai, Douai, something like that. There's a good word for the Wordle to start the Wordle. Would be that one. It's got 4 vowels in it. That'd be good. Douai and Bethune. That's probably not even pronounced right. It's probably Bethune or something like that. But those towns ended up going to France, and if you look now, you'll see that they are in France. But every year on the Assumption, there's a parade, and the parade brings a candle, a very large candle, made of beeswax, of course, made from the cathedral, and it goes through the city, and they deliver the candle to the Church of St. Mary of the Blinds, which is, there's some candle in St. Mary of the Blinds, and so you can see these things are kind of tied together. So they have this parade. So there's a parade on the 15th, and we find out about this on the 14th. So I go to Mass the morning of the 15th there for the Assumption, and I talked to Sister Beatrice and the priest about this parade, and got kind of, they said it's a parade, it's after the thing, and we march in the parade. And I was like, oh, we march in the parade. That sounds pretty cool. So after Mass gets over, the priest changes out of his vestments and puts on his special vestments for the parade, and by this time, this huge crowd has gathered out along the street next to the cathedral, and they're all lined up. And it is, they have they have the big candle, and they have this Marian statue that's carried by 2 people with these. They have the sticks that go on your shoulders, and they had this special little uniform that they wore if you get to carry the statue. And I would assume that that's some sort of honorable thing you get to do. so they lined up and they put the statue on there, and they put the candle on their shoulders, and the priests kind of were out in front of this part of the parade. It was a big parade, and just this piece was just a piece of that parade. So they were so they get all lined up and they start walking, and when I had talked to Sister Beatrice and to the priest, they said we walk in the parade, kind of implying that's what we Brugians do. So I figured, I'm looking at this and I see that I see the priest leading the way with the statue, and then the nuns were after that, but there was just the nuns by themselves. And I was like, I think I said to the girl that was there with me, I said, Nicole, I think these nuns need an escort. I think I will volunteer my services here to be in the parade and escort the nuns. So I joined the parade, and it was great fun. It snaked all the way through the city from the cathedral to the other church, St. Mary of the Blinds. And we went past all the houses, and people were leaning out their windows and they're waving. It was these are little streets, okay, and they kind of go along the canal, but the buildings are right along the edges of the street, so people can like lean out almost over the parade, and they're waving little hankies and little flags, and people are waving to their friends and chatting, and we had a grand old time. There were people dressed as like medieval knights, and there were guys pulling this big heavy trebuchet. There was a guy with a horse manure cart that had to, he followed the horses, and he cleaned up the road afterwards. He didn't get everything, but he got most of it and made it possible for the rest of us to walk. So it was wonderful fun, and I'd do it again in a heartbeat if I get invited. I don't know how you get to be Grand Marshal of the Brugian Assumption Parade, but I figure the first step is to just escort the nuns down the parade. So that was a good time. I hadn't been in a parade since I was in high school with the marching band, and like I said, we walked and we chatted and we waved to people and smiled and shook hands. It was a grand old time on the 15th of August. Meanwhile, I'm supposed to be back at the school working on my drawings. So I, as soon as that was over, I hustled back there and got in my chair and started erasing and redrawing, because that's what I ended up doing most of the time. So that was a Thursday, and the following day, Friday. Following day was Friday, and the day after that was Saturday, which was the day we had the presentation. So I had a day left after Thursday. And it turned out that Michelle arrived in Brussels on the 16th of August, which was like I said, that Friday. And maybe I said this before, maybe I haven't. The only downside to the whole summer school thing was this time apart, right? So I left in late June, and by this time it was like 6 weeks. And after we still had text conversations, and we had phone conversations, and this magic video call kinds of things that we did. But after a couple of weeks of her alone at home dealing with all the home alone things, we decided that she ought to just come join me for the last week of the summer school, which was very fun. So I switched to a double room there at the boarding school, and I picked her up at the airport in Brussels on the 16th, and she stayed throughout the remainder of the course through the 25th, which was great fun. So it was fun to have a built-in buddy to share all these escapades at the remainder of the course, to be there for the presentations and to get to see the work that these guys had done. She had heard me say about these things. Obviously, she hadn't listened to the podcast yet, but she was getting, I guess, spoilers before the podcast came out of, who the people were and what they were doing and the great work and the great people that the other students and the faculty were there at the school. So like I said, she arrived on Friday. Our presentations were on Saturday, the 17th. So this was the big summary of all the work that had been done over the last 4.5-5 weeks, something like that. And it was at the Béguinage, which was the I guess I'll call it the lay convent there in town. And it was a beautiful day. We were outside on a lawn with rows of chairs set up, and the sun was shining in all her glory. It was a wonderful, perfectly blue sky with a bright sun. It got a little bit hot. I got a little sunburn on my what should I say, my head that has less hair than it did when I was younger. So, and it was a very large crowd. We had, I didn't even count the rows of chairs. We had hundreds of people there, and some were locals, some were press people. There were architecture people from around the continent and from around the world. I met people from Pakistan. I met somebody from Georgia, not U.S. Georgia, but like the Asian Georgia. Is that Asian Georgia? I guess we call. So the traditional architecture community is very vibrant, and they are very loyal, and they're fiercely focused on. I guess to borrow a phrase, making architecture beautiful again. So they were all there, and there was a lot of picture taking and handshaking and people smiling and people giving great presentations of beautiful work. And it is done, these presentations in architecture, you don't know about this, they are done in front of what's called a jury, which is really a panel of people who should know these kinds of things. And they comment and they say, well, this was good because of this, and this was bad because of that. And these guys were highly, what should I say, highly effusive in their praise, and justifiably so. This was stunningly spectacular work by. It turns out there were 6 groups. My group of 5 was one of them, and there were 6 total groups, and they did not disappoint. It was wonderful. The talent of these students cannot be overemphasized. What was produced with only pencil and paper and a little bit of ink here and there in the last 10 days prior to these presentations it's just beyond description. The amount of work, the quality of the work, the detail in the work, the craftsmanship in the work. Like I said, the jury was just blown away, and I don't think there was. You could say, well, they were brought in to do this, but no, I don't. I think they were just honest, and there were a couple times they said, what do we do? This is beautiful stuff done by young students. Obviously, there's places where you can make things a little bit better. You had 10 days of drawing as a group. That was it, and we put these things together, and like the work, I drew my little city block, and the other people drew some fantastic things. The teamwork kinds of things, people find out what they do well, and they start attacking that. And other people say, you know what, that's your area, you go for it. I'll do this other piece, and so I focused on my little garden block. I had a lot of help. Some of they were like teaching assistants and other faculty that would give you a hand on. I'm not very good with drawing interiors of homes, and they knew all these rules for how wide a staircase should be and how many steps it should have, and they were able to crank out an interior for a home in about 12 minutes. It would have taken me about 16 hours. So I'm internally grateful to all the help that I got from these people. Jacob was great, Ricardo was great, Audity was great, and I'm sure I'm leaving people behind, but I wanted to make sure I laid those people out there with their names, because they were nothing I could have achieved, I could have done on my own. They were, and they were gracious too. I mean, nobody razzed anybody. They said, let me step in and help you out with this thing. Let me take care of this for you. Why don't you go get some lunch? And I'd come back from lunch, and boom, all this thing would be perfectly done. The windows were added, and with the draperies, and the floor layouts were all done. And they had put everything in place, drawn the flowers and the little trees. And it was just, I was, like I said, I'm eternally indebted to these people for keeping me out of the architectural trash heap, I guess. So it was great. There were 6, like I said, 6 presentations. There were 3 of them, and then a little snack, and then 3 more of them, and then we broke for lunch. And after the presentations, all these drawings were put on display at the Béguinage as an exhibition. So you can still go to see those. They are currently on display on Saturdays and Sundays from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. Bruges time, same as Brussels time, but Bruges time, 2 to 6 p.m. through November 4th, 2024. So if it is at that time and you have a desire to go see them, you just wander on over to the Béguinage, and it's the last house on the right, I guess, or on the left if you're coming the other way. So you'll find it there. Ask around. Admission is free, and they're all there. You can see all the work that we did there in Bruges, and some of the work from Bar is on display there as well. So it's a wonderful thing, and there's even some stuff on display from other architecture schools that were taking place around the same time in different places in Europe. So it's there for the taking. You can go see some beautiful drawings of some beautiful things created by some wonderful people. The final week of school was dedicated to crafts work and preparations for departure. So, cleaning you clean your dorm room, and you got to sweep up here and there and make sure we're leaving the place in a better state than we found it. So there was a field trip to Brussels there as well. So Brussels is a major world city, and because of that, it has some places that are atrocious. But since it's an old city, it also has some places that are absolutely stunningly beautiful. So we tend to focus on the beautiful stuff and leave the disastrous modernity mess to other people. But there's if you get a chance to you should go see these places and see what people used to do when these things mattered to people, and think about how you can get back to having beautiful things, because life is more fun with beautiful things. So the students during craft week, they worked on stone carving and ironwork, woodwork, plaster molding, making things with clay. And I'm not talking like little figurines for your desk. I'm talking like making clay tiles for work, like for doing flooring and stuff like that. So there were lots of hands-on handiwork things. All manners of those things were on display, and people worked very hard and learned all sorts of great skills. It was wonderful to see them. Some people were naturals at certain things, and it was amazing how fast they could crank them out. I, of course, struggled because, well, that's just my nature. Catherine, if you're listening, yes, I still don't do crafts very well. So this was a welcome manual endeavor as opposed to the highly intellectual work of design and drawing. So this was a welcome respite, I guess, from all that mental hard work. The physical stuff was good to see. People were tired at the end of the day, and this was the last week, so there were emotions were starting to run. We went to Virgil Mass at the cathedral on the last Saturday before we left, and said goodbye to the priest and sisters I had come to know. It was nice to have I guess I'll call it a touch of home while I was away. I saw the priest every Sunday, and he welcomed us to Mass the first weekend we were there, and it was a very nice thing to get to know somebody there outside of the school, and to recognize that there are people there that every Sunday mornings when I get up now, I think of what may be going on there at the church, and which masses he's doing at which parishes up there. It was what a great guy. What a great guy. He spoke Flemish and French and English and all sorts of other things, and just a good man all around. And the sisters I miss terribly. They were a little piece of a little, they are their own special little light in the world, and I miss seeing that. So we had a final big meal on Saturday with the whole group, followed by I guess I'll call it a bittersweet evening of saying goodbye to all the fellow students. There were a lot of, people it ended up being, there were 30 students, right? So there were, and we didn't have like high school yearbooks, but we did have sketchbooks, and a lot of people wrote things in people's sketchbooks. And it was fun to watch that and to see people appreciating each other after sharing close quarters and coming to know and to love each other over the last 5 weeks or so. It was gratifying for me to see. I enjoyed enjoying it, and that was a good night. There was a lot of wine and beers and some hugs and some tears. Yeah, that rhymes. Didn't even plan that. And then it was all over. Eventually somebody shut off the stereo around 2 a.m, and that was it. We left about 5:15 that Sunday morning. Caught a train to Brussels on a flight to JFK and then Indy and then back home late Sunday night, and my summer school adventure was closed. So now this would not be the buff I would if I just signed off at this point, because there will be a lesson. There should be a takeaway. There should be a reason we do these things, and there should be some sort of summary of that. So what is this takeaway, and how will I remember all of this? I have 4 bullet points here that I put down, and in no particular order. They kind of go like this. The first one is try something new, and I mean something new. This was way outside of my skill set and outside of my comfort zone. I suppose I could have joined the circus. That would have been, I think, farther outside of my comfort zone, but that would have actually involved physical discomfort, flying the trapeze or something like that, riding a zebra. Try something new and invest in the time to make it at least plausibly successful. I had the option once I got there of deciding to either go full bore into these activities that I knew I would be very bad at, or just kind of sit back and watch it and say, well, you guys keep drawing. I'm going to go wander around to the pub. But that's, that's not what I signed up for. I signed up to do what they were doing. And I think that you have to go all in. You can't go in part way. So you have to invest the time to make that successful. And I mean, I didn't produce great work, and I know that's been kind of a theme throughout here. But I worked really hard to produce the meager drawings that I sent in with my application, and I took time to write a thoughtful essay. I didn't just bang out a set of bullet points and hand it over to ChatGPT. I took time on that. I reread it. I had other people read it. I edited. What do they say? Had I had more time, I would have written less. Right? So I got it down under the 2-page limit that it was by starting early and trying to do good work. I investigated the books on the suggested reading list. I mean, I didn't buy all of them. There were like 30 books on there. Okay. But I made a plan to maximize my outcomes. I figured out when the flights were and how to get here and there. And I didn't just wing these things. I took the effort, I think. And for me, that makes all the difference. I always find out that if I worry about things up front, when the time comes, there's nothing to worry about. But if you don't worry about it up front, then you'll find something to worry about. So it always feels like it should be. It's almost futile because I work really hard to prep, and then nothing bad ever happens. But that's because I prep, right? So do the prep work. Make sure that you give it all the effort it should get. And this was very, very scary. I don't really like to admit that. Being an old man now, I don't like to admit that things are scary. I was very scared. I've interviewed for high profile jobs, and I've been in panel discussions at FDA and other places, European Medical Association kinds of things. And I've been in these discussions where people's lives and hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars are at stake. And I have felt less stress in those situations than I did preparing to go to this class this summer. So when I was at the airport in Philadelphia on my way over for my flight to Paris in late June, I got hit with, I guess I'll call it a triple migraine headache. And I've had migraines under stressful situations in the past in my life. And typically it starts with what they call visual aura, which is a little light that starts in your eyes, and then it spreads and covers your whole field of vision so you can't see for a while. And mine typically lasts about half an hour. And that's typically followed by nausea, and sometimes very nausea and kind of a heavy, cloudy feeling in my head. I got hit with 3 of these in a row. So I got the visual aura, and then that waned as I sat in the airport waiting for my flight. And then as that was getting better, another one came, and then a third one came. So I got hit with a triple migraine on the way to bar, even before class started on that I guess it was a Friday. Yeah, I guess it was a Friday. So, I was convinced I was out of my league. I was tempted to call it off and just grab a flight back home. I was out of my league. I was very much overwhelmed, but I went anyway. And I was going to say against my better judgment, but no. It was good judgment to go anyway, even when I was scared. And I learned something on arrival, and that's point number 2. I learned that good people make all the difference. And I typed these words, and I didn't feel the me getting all teary-eyed like I'm feeling right now when I'm saying them out loud. But good people make all the difference. And since they do, you need to make yourself into one of these good people. The students I met, they were living on a different plane altogether. But they were humble enough to share what they had worked to learn with me. And I remember very early on in bar trying to figure out I knew I had to shade a thing. I had to do some kind of cross profile thing. And I was looking at other people's drawings. Okay, how did they do it? And I wasn't and what I don't want to do is try something and fail at it. Sometimes I'd practice in my sketchbook and then figure out how to do it. But I didn't even know how to do this shading. Do I turn the pencil on the side like this? Do I roll it? Do I slide it? Do I push here? Do I how do I know when to start and when to stop? And I turned to the guy who was probably the best student there, because he was the guy in the room at the time when I was doing this. And I said, hey, how do you do this? And he just stopped what he was doing. And he spent about 10 minutes just showing me all these different ways that I could do this shading technique. And I remember just being flabbergasted that this young kid, who was obviously my superior in every manner of speaking with regard to this activity, was giving so freely of his time, because he was cranking out these things and doing a lot of other things actually on the side while we were at school. But he was so gracious, and that's when it first hit me that he could have been a jerk. I mean, he could have been. He wasn't. But he could have decided, well, hey, Pops, if you don't know how to do it, well, it's not on me. And he didn't do that. And he was like all of them, he was one of the good guys. And so they were humble enough to share what they had with little old me. And so I'll ask you to be kind and be humble and give of yourself. Other people gave so that you can have. They did. That's how you got to where you are, is what other people gave you. And some of it you did on your own. I got it. I mean, not everything's given to you. You do have to do some work. I got that. But people gave you what you needed to get started. Your parents changed your diapers, They drove you to swim practice or architecture camp, all right, or whatever. People gave to you, and you need to do the same. Love deeply. And we say this all the time here on the podcast. Loving is willing the good of the other as other. So how do you do that deeply? And what you need to do is you need to look to see how you can help those around you find and follow the path they need to follow to achieve their unique manifestation of Imago Dei, what they were called to be. And that's an active thing you can do. And loving deeply is doing that. Here's a person I know. Here's a person I met. Where are they going? How do I get to help them get to where they need to be? And that's loving deeply. Okay. That path that they're following to become their manifestation of Imago Dei, that is their good. That is what the good is. So when we seek the good, that's where we're going. We're trying to get onto that path. And we know that on this path, if you follow this path, being on the path will bring you joy. It might bring you some sadness, might bring you some heartache, but deep down it brings you joy because you're fulfilling what you were made to do. All right. And if you think about that bringing of joy, isn't that what love does? Isn't that what love does? It brings you joy. And if you are a coach, when you see your team succeed, that gives you joy. When you're a parent and you see your child succeed, that gives you joy. And when you see them succeed along that line, right? I mean, if they succeed, and if your child succeeds in something bad, that does not bring you joy, right? Because you know that they are not on the path they're meant to be. So loving deeply helps give them joy, and it gives you joy as well, because it's helping you become who you're supposed to. Like these things all tie together, right? And that's the truest way to get true joy, is to love deeply. That's number 2. The third thing is seek the transcendentals. Seek those things that transcend where we are, and those things essentially, you've heard this before too: truth, beauty, and goodness. Truth. Don't fake it. Don't ignore reality. The truth will set you free. If you are lying to yourself, that ain't truth. It will not bring you joy. You will find yourself descending into that slow, decaying little point of nothing that is the opposite of the infinitude of the variety of the good. Those things that are fake, they're untrue. It's not going to get you where you need to go. Be honest with yourself. Beauty. Your heart will pull you to those things that take your breath away. Make the effort to go there. Sometimes it will be hard. Your heart will say, I want to go there. And you're like, that's awfully hard. It might be expensive. It might hurt. I'm scared. I don't want to go. I just had 3 migraines. Go anyway. Goodness. Like I said, there's infinite variety in the good. Find your path and follow it to get great joy. Truth, beauty, and goodness transcend. There are things above the mire in which we are stuck. So seek the transcendentals. And lastly, this is point 4. We've talked over and over again on this podcast about this and the idea that we are all unique manifestations of Imago Dei. And the question becomes, well, what exactly is this image and likeness of God, this Imago Dei? What is it? And there are some episodes that talk about this a little bit. If you read, there's one there about, I don't know, it's from last summer with when I went to a wedding in Iowa. It talks a little bit about this. But Genesis tells us in the first chapter about 2 of the fundamental components of understanding who God is. First, God creates. He brings order out of chaos. He puts things right. Creation and order, okay? That is the first thing that God does. And secondly, each thing he creates is good, right? All those little things, and he saw that it was good. He saw that it was good. Light, day, night, land, sea, animals, plants. It was good. And in total, he sees that everything he has made is very good. And that is the additional thing that is added once he creates man and puts man in the garden with him. And the New Testament reveals further that indeed God is love, which takes us back to the point we just talked about in point 2. It's the way to get to joy, okay? And so God creates, and he creates that which is good, and God is love, and that should be what love does when you do love right. It should create, it should bring order, it should bring joy, and it should be very good. So you fulfill your manifestation as Imago Dei by creating beautiful, good things in love. You fulfill your manifestation as Imago Dei by creating beautiful, good things in love. Whether you're building a cathedral or designing a playroom or planting a garden or making a chair or writing a report or sweeping the floor or calling your mother or changing the oil in your car, you create. So make it beautiful. Have it call to your heart. Make it true. Get the details right. Make it good, not just good enough. And do it in love. Create beautiful, good things in love. There are metrics there that are to be optimized, and they are other than economic utility. These are things that transcend truth, beauty, goodness, and creating these things in love. Heaven and earth shall pass away. Look for those things that last. And the greatest of those things is love. Remember, seek the good. Live virtuously and flourish and enjoy the adventure of life.
It's going to be a great day.